The UN Wildlife Conference, CITES, has concluded a day earlier than expected in South Africa. Following 2 weeks of marathon negotiations, delegates have passed a raft of resolutions. These include measures to combat wildlife trafficking and cybercrime, as well as the closure of ivory markets and the stricter monitoring of hunting trophies. Sharks, rays, the African grey parrot and the pangolin have been awarded higher levels of protection. This year's conference has been the largest of its kind, with 3,500 people in attendance. The Secretary General of CITES, John Scanlon, has described it as the most critical meeting in the 43-year history of the convention.
This has really been a groundbreaking meeting, this one, and I think we've turned the tide in terms of protection of wildlife, wild plants and animals in many ways. But then a whole range of other decisions, how do we tackle corruption, working with UN Convention Against Corruption? How do we deal with cybercrime and wildlife crime, working with Interpol? How do we deal with demand? Where's the demand coming from? And not just say, let's do a mass campaign, tell everyone isn't this terrible, rather say, we need to identify where is the demand, how do we target it, how do we deal with it? I could go on. There's been so many successes with this conference, the best ever in our 43-year history. There will be people that will be disappointed. Some countries wanted to open trade, that was stopped. Some wanted to lift elephants to Appendix 1, that was not accepted. So there are certain issues where people will feel disappointed, but in terms of the overall conference, the conservation gains, the benefits for wildlife, we made massive strides at this meeting. And we also, for the first time, started to engage in the plenary with rural communities.
Let's get you the latest out of the CITES summit now. CCTV's Clementine Logan joins us live now from the Santon Convention Centre. Clem, you've been following events at the COP17 for us. Has it been viewed as a success?
Well, Panina, it really depends on who you speak to. As you heard there, delegates and conservationists certainly welcomed the uplisting of several endangered species, as well as new measures to boost law enforcement efforts to tackle wildlife trafficking and cybercrime. But they were also bitterly divided over the issue of the protection of Africa's elephants and a proposal to ban the trade in ivory. And essentially, voting represented that divide, and as one conservationist told me, maintained the status quo, apart from, that is, an important decision to close down domestic ivory markets. And that's something that many hope will go some way in helping curb the appetite for elephant ivory. But to tell me more on that, I'm now joined by Kevin Ailey from the International Fund for Animal Welfare's Wildlife Trade Programme. Kelvin, what's your assessment in how far COP17 has gone to better protect Africa's elephants?
Well, thank you for having us on the program. I think that one of the things that your listeners should know right off the bat is that there is no international trade in elephant ivory products. So that's one of the things that came out as a major achievement here. There were a couple of proposals that were put forward. There was one that was put forward by Namibia and Zimbabwe that essentially was calling for a relaxation of the ban and reopen international elephant ivory trade. That was defeated. There was also a discussion on closure of domestic ivory markets, calling on countries, especially countries where evidence has shown that the existence of their markets are driving the illegal killing of elephants, that these countries should actually move forward to put their markets beyond use. We saw good leadership by China in that working group discussion. As your listeners may know, China last year committed to closing their domestic market for the next year, and they have the largest ivory market in the world. So closing domestic ivory markets, there was a discussion with respect to setting up a framework that would regularize the trade in elephant ivory products. That was defeated. And there was also some discussions around national ivory action plans, where countries are being asked to develop these action plans that would essentially focus on stopping the killing of elephants, stopping the trafficking, and stopping the demand. So we feel that this COP has gone far. It has been mixed in the sense that there was a proposal that was put forward by a number of African countries, including Benin, Burkina Faso and Kenya, asking for a listing of the African elephant on Appendix 1. And that would essentially have, create that atmosphere where we have more international protections for elephants. And that didn't happen. But, on a whole, I think we came out here with some good decisions around protecting the African elephant.
Well, as you say, a lot of decisions taken, but let's talk about the impact on the ground, and how far do you think the decisions from COP17 are actually going to impact on curbing poaching and curbing the demand for ivory?
Well, I think it's important for your listeners to also know that, coming out of here from CITES, their decisions and recommendations, it's going to require political will on behalf of member countries to really put the resources and follow through on some of the decisions here to stop, the killing of elephants. For example, there were decisions that were taken around corruption. We recognize the role of corruption in the illegal trade of ivory. There was decisions around the need to focus on demand reduction strategies, especially in countries in Southeast Asia, in particularly China, where you work with communities and target groups to reduce that sort of demand and consumption of illegal ivory trade products. So I think coming out of here is going to require political will. We cannot move away from some of what we have been doing. I mean, I think if you look at the issue of ivory trade, we're looking at source, transit, and consumer countries. In some countries, law enforcement is going to be key. Support for park rangers at the site level. In the transit countries, working with customs and border officials to be able to build that interagency and regional collaboration to stop wildlife trafficking. So I think CITES sets the framework for that. There are decisions that are taken from here, but we're going to require political will from governments back home to really put some systems in place to ensure that nationally these decisions are having an impact on the ground.
Thank you so much for joining us, Kelvin Ali. Well, as you mentioned there, a lot of international cooperation will be needed. The impact, in terms of the impact on the ground following COP17, which has now ended, time will tell, but most of the decisions taken here at the conference should be implemented and enter into force in up to 90 days from now. Back to you.
Clementine Logan joining us live from Johannesburg. Many thanks, Clem.